Marburger, and I will be presenting you with my evidence and child advocacy assignment.
The criminal justice system. The people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
Zach Johnson is being charged with the first-degree murder of his roommate, Christopher Robbins. On the night of December 4th, 2016, the two men attended a lacrosse formal at 1372 Arlington Street in Dover, Delaware. Both men had been having a conversation on the porch when tension rose and Johnson began pushing Robbins. For the remainder of the night, the fighting continued, even after the boys went home to their house located on North State Street. The next morning, Alexis Shipley, the girlfriend of Robbins, went over to their house to bring him breakfast. Upon entering the home, she saw Robbins lying on the floor, covered in blood, next to a knife which also appeared to be covered in blood. As she walked into the living room, she saw Johnson standing against the wall, looking disheveled, covered in what appeared to be blood. She then called the police, and Johnson was arrested. Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant has been charged with the crime of first-degree murder of his roommate. The evidence will show that a witness testimony placed the defendant at the scene of the crime, where a knife was recovered in the deceased's blood. The evidence I will present will prove to you that the defendant is guilty of the crime he is accused of. The people call the girlfriend of the deceased to the stand. Pursuant to Rule FRE 401, the witness testimony is relevant because she had a relationship with the deceased and was present at the time when the cops arrived. This testimony does not meet the exception laid out by FRE 402. The testimony meets the standards of the balancing test laid out by FRE 403. The balancing test is a test to prove whether or not the probative value outweighs the unfair prejudice. Under Rule FRE 603, the witness will make an affirmation to testify truthfully. Pursuant to Rule FRE 701, a witness is allowed to testify on their opinion as long as it is not based on scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge. Please stand. Raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you shall give in case before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your first and last name for the record.
Alexis Shipley.
You may be seated. What is your relationship with the deceased?
I'm his girlfriend.
And how long have you been dating?
About 5 years.
Were you with him on the night of December 4th, 2016?
Yes.
And where were you?
We were at lacrosse formal.
The defense would like to admit Exhibit A into the record, a photograph of the witness and the deceased. Pursuant to Rule FRE 401, the witness testimony is relevant because it helps support the witness's testimony. This photograph does not meet any of the exceptions laid out by FRE 402. The photograph meets the standards of the balancing test rule under FRE 403. The balancing test is whether or not the probative value outweighs the unfair prejudice. Exhibit A. Was this photograph taken the night of the formal?
Yes, it was.
Did you see anything happen at the formal between the defendant and the deceased?
No, I did not.
Can you tell me what you saw the next morning upon entering the home of Johnson and Robbins?
I saw Robbins laying on the floor covered in blood. I also saw Johnson standing against the wall covered in what appeared to be blood.
And was there anything else that you saw?
Not that I know of.
The defense would like to admit Exhibit B into the record. It is a copy of the witness's prior statement made at the time of the crime. Pursuant to FRE 401, the prior statement is relevant because it was made at the time of the defendant's arrest. It does not meet any of the requirements laid out by FRE 402. The testimony meets the standard of the balancing test under FRE 403. The balancing test is whether or not the probative value outweighs the unfair prejudice. Pursuant to Rule FRE 613, you are permitted to show the prior statement that the witness made during the examination. Have you ever seen this statement before?
Yes.
Was this the statement that you gave the morning after the incident?
Yes.
Can you please read the highlighted portion?
Yes. Upon entering the house, I saw Robbins laying on the floor covered in blood next to a knife which appeared to be covered in blood. As I walked into the living room, I saw Johnson standing against the wall looking covered in what appeared to be blood.
The defense would like to admit Exhibit C into the record. It is a photograph of the witness, the deceased, and the defendant. Pursuant to Rule FRE 401, the photograph is relevant because it depicts both the defendant and the deceased and the witness the night of December 4th, 2016. This photograph does not meet any of the exceptions laid out by FRE 402. The photograph meets the standards of the balancing test under Rule FRE 403. The balancing test is whether or not the probative value outweighs the unfair prejudice. Alexis, was this photograph taken the night of December 4th, 2016?
Yes.
Is the defendant in this picture?
Yes, on my right.
At this time, the defense would like to admit Exhibit C, D, and E into the record. They are photographs of the deceased and the defendant taken at the time of the crime scene. The photographs are relevant because they both depict the defendant and the deceased the morning following December 4th, 2016. These photographs do not meet any of the exceptions laid out by FRE 402. They meet the standards of the balancing test under Rule FRE 403. The balancing test is whether or not the probative value outweighs the unfair prejudice. Alexis, do these pictures accurately depict what you saw when you walked into their home the morning of December 5th?
Yes.
At this time, the prosecution does not have any additional questions for the witness. The witness is excused. Your Honor, and lady and gentlemen of the jury, there is absolutely no question about whether or not the defendant and the deceased were together on the night of December 4th, 2016. There is likewise no question that the witness and the defendant had a relationship. Secondly, there is no doubt that the witness was at the scene of the crime or that the body of the deceased was found next to a knife which was covered in his blood. Based on the evidence brought forward within this trial and the witness testimony in which you saw, it is now your job to decide if you believe the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And thank you.